Hi everyone, this is Udit from Prepfully. Today we are going to be talking to Murilo. More people than ever today are exploring data intensive roles in their careers. Murilo works as a data scientist in a consulting firm, and today we're going to talk a little bit about how he got there, what he does, some of the considerations that went into his decisions, and his advice to folks considering data focused roles within their own careers. To get us started, Murilo, do you want to briefly maybe introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So, hi everybody. My name is Murilo. I am a data scientist, and I work for a technology company called Insights that provides technology solutions for businesses. So, I'm part of the national AI practice in the company. Basically, I'm a consultant, and our practices are the national AI practice really specializes in just providing solutions that mainly involve AI and machine learning, and basically anything that involves making predictions and classifications, which is what machine learning is all about.
Hi, I'm Udit from Prepfully, and you're watching our Day in the Life video series. These are short conversations with folks who really know what they're talking about, all the way from craft skills to interview prep, from getting the first job to senior level career transitions. So, lots of unique insights and experiences distilled into key takeaways for you. We hope you find this useful. All right, thanks for that. So, a consulting focused startup helping lots of companies must be a lot of diversity in what you do on a day to day basis. Do you want to share a little bit of what that day to day looks like?
Sure. So, as a consultant, I have responsibilities with my clients, but also with the company. So, I usually have a to-do list that I track those responsibilities. And usually those involve daily stand-ups to go over my daily tasks that I have for the day. I usually try to block a section of my day for just development work. Each day is a little bit different depending on my tasks. So depending on that is going to be what I'm going to be developing. And then probably when I'm not developing, I'm usually in meetings with either my managers or with people from my clients. So that's a little bit about my day.
So, a lot of craft work, but also a lot of stakeholder management, both internally and externally, by the sound of it. So, tell us a little bit maybe about the skills you feel help us thrive in such a role, not just skills specific to the DS craft, but maybe in the unique environment of being a data scientist in a consulting firm, also incorporating the maybe people aspects of success. What do you think are the skills that help you thrive?
Sure. So definitely data science is a very broad subject, and it's also very complex if you think about it, right? It's a combination of computer science, is a combination of computer science with mathematics and statistics, and the business domain that you're applying that. It's quite complex, and you do need to have a good foundation of coding skills. Usually, Python goes really well. Some people are really good in R for statistical analysis. You also need to have some stats background and some math under your belts, but by no means you have to completely have a PhD or a master knowledge in all of those. A lot of the skills that from a data scientist, you actually ended up learning the job. At least that's what I found out with experience. But regarding other skills, because data science, it's a role, it's very different than a role from a software engineer, for example, or a data engineer, where they're usually showing the work by what they're building. Data scientists usually require some kind of persuasion whenever delivering their solutions, because if you think about it, your success as a data scientist is measured by how much impact you had, right? So let's say I build a model, and well, let's give an example. I work for a streaming company, okay? And I create a model that is able to identify, I don't know, maybe I can identify if there's more than one people watching the same account. Or, well, you don't actually need a model for that, but I can identify how many people are watching that streaming service, right? In the same room. So that's kind of like a cool model. I don't know if anybody has ever tried to do that before on the top of my head. So if I presented the model to the business and the business decide to accept the model, then me as a data scientist, I had success, right? But even if my model that I presented it is successful, it's accurate, it shows good results, but for any reason, if the business does not decide to implement it, then I do not have success as a data scientist. And that's what I meant when I said some persuasion. So basically what I'm trying to say is that your delivery really goes a long way whenever you're trying to build something as a data scientist. The way how you showcase your projects goes really, really a long way. Like basically the way how you communicate with the business, right? You have to be able to break down very complex things into very small and be able to translate those for the business. So, yeah.
No, that's really helpful. So if I maybe summarize that and correct me if I'm interpreting this right, like the point one you made is an extensive familiarity with both the depth of topics that a data scientist looks at, not just the computer science part of it, but also the statistics and mathematical parts of it. Followed then by ensuring that whatever you work on, and this was the second thing, the second skill that helps you thrive is making sure whatever you do leads to business impact and ties to a business value proposition. And then the third thing was all around communication, not just working with stakeholders, but also evangelizing what you're doing and making sure people recognize the impact and the value that it's adding. And these are really important takeaways, I think, for the community. But if you had to maybe tell us or just advise the community on how these skills could potentially be demonstrated in an interview, in that 45-minute segment where you're trying to show that, hey, I can ace this job, what could be some ways to pull that off?
Sure. I think that it really counts. Well, if you're a newcomer, I think the best way to showcase your interviews is through a portfolio or projects. So I think it's really important if you're new to data science or you're trying to transition into data science, having projects that showcase your skill. It's really going to go a far way because you can talk about them during the interview, especially if they're very interesting and they're special to you. Then you go really in depth into them. And it just sounds interesting, not only to you, but for the interviewing as well. So yeah, I would say definitely try to have projects, host them on your GitHub page. That goes a really, really long way. Absolutely.
No, that's a really helpful tip. So this is like, I guess, preparation, not just for the interview, but just to be a better data scientist generally is to have a portfolio of things where you try things out and then advertise it in your GitHub. Also gives you great content to discuss with your interviewers on what you've explored in the past. What about, say, in the interview itself? So when it comes to like demonstrating things like how you align your work to impact or demonstrating the breadth of your knowledge, what could be some good ways to demonstrate this during an interview?
Sure. I think that really having a very in-depth knowledge of what you've done goes a really long way, because I think during an interview, the interviewer is going to start asking very specific questions about what you've done. They basically want to see if you can solve problems, right? So they're going to ask you questions about bottlenecks that you had during the project, what you've done to overcome those things, because what they really want to see is that, can you solve problems, right? Can you learn new technologies? So yeah, I think showcasing the steps that you took to accomplish this, to accomplish your projects or to overcome a problem, it's really, really important. And usually during the interviews, I really practice the STAR approach. I don't know if you've ever heard of the STAR approach. STAR means situation, task, action, and reaction, I believe. So you start saying with the situation is whatever problem you're trying to solve. So, I created this really cool forecasting model that can predict apartment prices, right? So that's the situation. The task would be, the situation actually would be, I'm moving to a new city, let's say, and I want to see if seasonality trends actually influence the apartment prices. So that's the situation. The task would actually be, can I create a model to predict this? And then the action would be the actual model that you do. And then the reaction would be what outcomes came from the model. So it's kind of like a little story, you start with a question. It's hopefully a interesting question. And then that question leads to other things, pretty much like unfolding a story. So whenever I'm doing interviews and I'm trying to speak about projects that I've done in the past or about previous experiences, I try to tell them, like in a story, how I would lay out a story. It usually starts with a question, and then that lays out to the other sequence of steps.
All right, that's good to know. So, like again, if I summarize, it's not just about what you delivered, then it's also talking about the how you did it, being prepared maybe for the question and answers and deep dives that your interviewer is going to do, because they're not only interested in assessing the depth of your knowledge, but also the approach you took. And finally, the critical part here is also to frame it into a narrative, make it a story which brings the interviewer along in their journey and shows them all the way from why we did this, what we were trying to solve for before, what we did, and how we executed on it, and how we delivered impact in the final outcomes. So really nice.
Absolutely.
That's good. Thanks for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk back to your interviewing experience. So when you were looking for a job, how did you go around? Like step one, deciding what type of role to interview for, given that there are so many data roles out there, data engineering, analysis, and then maybe we'd also like to hear how you approached interview preparation.
Sure. So, wow, that's a really good question. I think that it starts with having a good resume. That you can clearly showcase your skills. But let's just talk about the interview, I guess. So for each interview, I did a lot of interviews when I finished. Before I got my job, I did a lot of interviews. So maybe a little pep talk for the people watching this right now is that if you're going through interviews and you're just getting rejections, and maybe you're on LinkedIn and you only see posts of people saying how they got accepted into companies and they're so happy, just know that behind those acceptances, there's a huge amount of rejections. So don't get discouraged if you're getting rejections. It's just part of the process, and that's okay. You just got to keep trying. You just got to get one yes. So for me, it was really tough when I was interviewing because I had just finished my master's and it was during COVID and nobody was hiring. And on top of that, I'm from Brazil. And so I'm international, and a lot of companies, they face a lot of resistance when hiring international people because of visa issues and things like that, right? So I interviewed with a lot of companies. I applied for a lot of jobs, like a lot. That was my full-time job, just applying for jobs. And one thing that I noticed was the more interviews that I did, the better I got at interviewing. So I do think that one thing, practice goes a long way. Also, preparation goes a long way. So for each interview that I did, I created a document. I pretty much created a template, and I had that same templates for every single company that I did. So on the top of the template, I would put just information about the company. So I would go on the company website. I would do my research. I would just see what the company is about. What do they do? What are the things that they do that interest me? Maybe something that I learned. And I put that on the top. And then the rest of the document that I had, it was basically, I think it was 10 or maybe 12 questions that usually come up in interviews, like tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me about a time that you had to solve a problem. Tell me about this project that you did, things like that. And I would already kind of not write word by word, but basically write the main concepts to answer those questions. So they were fresh in my head, right? And depending on the company, those answers might change a little bit. So that was really good. And then I think the third portion of the template it was just questions that I would mainly I would think that I would be asked depending on the role. So maybe if he was a data engineer role, because I was applying for a lot of different jobs. Mostly I was getting interviews for data engineer roles because I had a very strong SQL background.
Okay.
And I was getting data engineering interviews, but I did have a lot of data science projects on my resume. So some interviews I was getting as a data engineer, most of them was data engineer related, but some of them were data science related. And I wanted to work as a data scientist. So the third part of my template would be just technical questions that I would possibly get on an interview. And then I would just have the template, and then based on the company, I would just change all of my answers or review them before the interview and really try to prepare as much as I could, even though you know that coming into an interview, they are going to ask you questions that you might not be prepared for, and that's okay. Sometimes that's the goal. It's kind of, to see how you react on situations you're not expecting for. So that's okay. But I'll definitely say prepare goes a really long way, and don't get discouraged. You just gotta keep applying.
Yeah, lots to unpack there. Like, I think the key messages are that it's okay to face rejection. Everyone does. You only hear about the, I guess, successful stories. Nobody advertises their rejections, or at least very few people do.
Mm-hmm.
Yet that's also your primary way of getting practice, and that's super important because you want to prepare yourself for that inevitable question that will be asked that you haven't prepared for, and it takes a great deal of practice in just understanding how to deal with that on the fly and being okay with it. And also, like, within preparation, there are certain, I guess, frameworks and templates that can be used to structure your thoughts, make sure that you have your stories nailed down. And that doesn't necessarily mean preparing the entire script and memorizing it and spouting it like a robot, but it does mean giving thought to, hey, what is a really difficult problem I've solved, or what were the steps I took so that I can like communicate these in a concise manner to my interviewer in that ultimately 45 minutes where I have to show all my skills somehow in that much time.
Mm-hmm.
That's really helpful. Thanks for sharing. Last question from me. If you had to give one tip to a college student currently considering a data focused role, what would it
Mm. Really focus on your connections.
be? Mhm.
Really focus on your connections early on, and focus. I would say really try to get an internship during summer.
Mhm.
If you're a college student, in your junior year, in your senior year, try to get at least one internship under your belt so you have some experience, because nothing, you can do as many projects as you want, but nothing's going to be experience.
Mm.
So having that experience, having that internship, that first, foot on the door, is going to really, really go a long way
Mm.
to actually get a full-time position. And maybe you get an internship and you do so well that the company decides to hire you full-time after you finish your school. So I would say that really goes a long way. And also maybe just for someone that is not in college, but they do want to transition into data science or
Mm.
any kind of role, is that really focus on projects. If I could start my data science journey again, I would have done more projects in the beginning instead of focusing on just a lot of the theory that I have to, learn everything before I do a project. No, just learn something, do a project, learn something else. Maybe you reiterate and you improve that project. So I would definitely have done more projects early on my career. I would say those are the main two advices that I would give.
So, like, basically, practical application beats out theory any day. Like,
Mm-hmm.
be it through a job or an internship where you can get like job experience, or just through applying theoretical concepts into your own projects, which forces you to consider the implications of how you apply it, but also how to extract learnings and insights and basically make something come out of that theory. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that was super helpful. Thank you so much for joining us today, Murilo. That I think our viewers are going to find this pretty helpful. We'd love to potentially record something more with you further down the line as well, if you're up for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's been a pleasure. And thank you.
Thanks for watching the video. If you liked it, please subscribe. Our website is prepfully.com. We've got lots of interview questions there. You can also schedule a mock interview with one of our experts. You can find the link in the description below. All the best from us at Prepfully, and we hope you totally rock your interview.